I was 33 years old when we acquired Mel Jackson. We built it up to a public company and sold it for 15 years later for $483 million.
What would you attribute that growth to?
A smart answer would be John Hewitt, but...
Boy, do I have a special guest for you today. I have Mr. John Hewitt joining me for today's interview. John is one of the most successful franchisors in the history of franchising. He's been in the space for decades, bringing two companies public, Jackson Hewitt and Liberty Tax Service. John is also an author of the book, I Compete. This book talks about John's failures along the way. John today is still, even in his older years, pushing forward, and he just founded another company in the past 5 years called Loyalty Brands. Loyalty Brands is a platform brand. Learn today from John and take some valuable knowledge from this interview. John, thank you so much for being on the show today. It's an absolute honor to have somebody of your prestige on the show. There's not many entrepreneurs, especially in the franchising space, that have done what you've done throughout your career. And then just welcome to Distilled Wisdom.
Thanks. I've been incredibly blessed.
So, John, the series of the show is to kind of get a feel for you, who you are, and, kind of your background, and starting all the way from, adolescence and, where you grew up and the whole shebang.
Okay.
So would you mind telling me a little bit about where you're from, how you grew up?
Sure. I grew up in mostly upstate New York, and I went to high school in a suburb of Buffalo, Hamburg, New York, and went to the University of Buffalo. And that's when my first huge blessing that I found out what I wanted to do when I was just 20 years old. I've interviewed thousands of people in my life, and most people don't know what they want to be when they grow up. But I was fortunate. I took an H&R Block course, and I loved it. Changed my life. And 54 years later, I'm still in the same industry, having a greatest time.
Awesome. So did you have a two-parent household, or?
I did. I grew up in both parents were, my mom had 5 children very quickly. So she was a stay-at-home mom until my youngest sister got out of diapers and into school. And my dad was very successful. He became a CFO of a public company at his peak of his career before he joined me in our entrepreneurial ventures.
And how many siblings do you have, John?
I have 4 siblings. I was the oldest of 4. I talk about starting to work for H&R Block when I was in college, but that came about because my dad was a frustrated entrepreneur. And I was born when he was at Michigan State, and he always wanted to be an entrepreneur. Most people don't remember not only a world without malls, a world without shopping centers. And I remember when I was about 7 or 8 years old, they built the first shopping center near me in the whole market. And at the time we were living in Rochester. And I remember my dad with a next door neighbor making drawings of a vehicle that could brush the stones off of the parking lot of the shopping center.
Like a street sweeper?
Yeah, sort of like a street sweeper, except for just for parking lot. So he was always wanted to be self-employed, but he didn't we were very poor, and we didn't have enough. He didn't have enough extra money to go do it. He had to work full time. So by the time I was 20, now he had started. My youngest sister was now 9. And he started to have some extra money, CFO of a public company, and he tried to buy an H&R Block franchise. So we lived in a suburb of Buffalo called Hamburg, and there was no H&R Block in Hamburg. So he called up H&R Block and said, we'd like to buy a franchise. And they said, well, as a matter of fact, we are going to open a company store in Hamburg this year. We've already picked it out. It's 2 blocks from where you live. It's right on Main Street. And why don't you have your son take our course and work for us? So the reason I got into H&R Block was,
well, how did it turn from your dad, applying to buy a franchise into them offering you a job with H&R Block?
Well, essentially in the tax preparation industry, it's a seasonal business.
Sure.
So they're in desperate need of seasonal preparers. So once I took the course, I was a star at the course. I was easily hired as a preparer. So it wasn't a year-round job. It was a seasonal tax preparer. And they were open 9 to 9 Monday through Friday and 9 to 5 on Saturday.
And this was at that corporate location?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So they needed preparers. There's always a need for in the tax preparation industry for quality people that will only work for 3.5 months, because you don't make a lot of money. Sure. And it's not enough to make a living. So how do you find people that will do that? And so it was easy to get a job. In fact, one of the things I don't ever say is I never had a resume. I didn't need a resume to work as a tax preparer for H&R Block. And after that, I started companies. So I'm one of the few adults in the United States of my age that have never had a resume in their whole life.
So I might be getting ahead of myself a little bit, because we're going to go into, the Jackson Hewitt story and Liberty Tax and everything. But I have a question about that. With it being seasonal, how do you coach franchisees to ensure that they're staffed, with it only being that, those peak few months? How do they go through to ensure that they have enough people during those months to, meet the demand of the market?
Yeah, that's one of the things that I stole from H&R Block. I've been competing with H&R Block my whole career. So most of what I've done is identical to what H&R Block done. I just did it better. But H&R Block, one of the things they've done best is they run a tax school, and they teach people to prepare income tax. Many people take that course just for themselves.
Sure.
But they say, you know what? I might want to be a preparer. So some people they buy a rental property, and so they want to learn how to do their own return. They start a small business, and the best students are students that are just taking it to learn for their own situation and say they try it, and then they love it. They fall in love with tax preparation. They're the taxpayers, the best taxpayers, just love their customers, love what they do, and they're obsessive about it. And so you actually, through this class, teach people to be tax junkies. And so the best preparers of all the major firms are tax junkies. And so that income tax course that you take is the bait that you use to get your tax preparers each and every year. It's worked successfully.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I took that course in 1969, and it was.
Did they offer it for free, or is it a paid course?
It's a paid course. If you need employees, if you're desperate for employees,
cover the cost,
you offer it for free.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. So again, I'm not very familiar with taxes, so I'm in the service space, right? I have home service brands. Professional services isn't something I'm used to, so it's awesome to learn about different industries like that. So you went from H&R Block, and it sounds like you said, you've been competing for your whole life, against H&R Block. When you left H&R Block, walk me through the conditions there. Was it just because you wanted to do your own thing, or I'm an entrepreneur, and the way I see things, I can't work for somebody else. It just will not work out. And that's my personality. And most of the other founders and entrepreneurs that I've met, they have a similar trait to them. And that's why they end up branching out and doing their own thing. But I'd love to hear your reasoning and why you didn't go through, growing in corporate America, get to a CEO position, and instead go out on your own.
Yeah, that was unusual in this sense that when I started with H&R Block and I was promoted into management, I was promoted by a regional director into management. And I set my goal when I was in my early 20s. I want to be an H&R Block regional director. And I just made it. And when I was 30 years old, I made it. And my dad interceded again And he had bought one of the first Apple computers. And most people can't remember a world without computers. But there was a mainframe that was as big as this room that was running his public company. Now, that mainframe doesn't have as much power, didn't have 1,000th of the power of your cell phone today. I mean, it was huge. It has bells and whistles. But he bought that first desktop Apple computer, and he loved it. And he said, John, let's computerize taxes. And I was like happy. I was doing great. I was one of the top. In my first year as a regional director, I was one of the top in the country. I was my ego. I was in the right place. I was making good money, nice bonus. And I said, I didn't want to. It took him about 6 or 8 months to convince me. He had to quit his job first and start building the software.
So your dad really pulled you into entrepreneurship.
My dad was, he brought me kicking and screaming in. Finally he got a partner. The public company that he was with said, we will invest. We believe in what you're doing. My dad left the public company, and the CEO said, well, what are you going to do? And my dad told him, he said, we want to be part of that. And so between the two of them, they offered me so much money and such an opportunity that I couldn't refuse. So all the credit of dragging me away from H&R Block comes to, I give it to my dad.
It sounds like you and your dad had a very strong relationship.
You know, it was interesting because when I was young, I was very, very rebellious, incredibly rebellious. And so we fought like cats and dogs. It wasn't until I became a business person and became a manager and managing hundreds of people that now we could see eye to eye and have respect for each other. And so once, again, my relationship changed from black and white with my dad. I was the worst enemy, the toughest critic, the toughest one. I couldn't be controlled. I was out of control, and it was finally, I was immature, and finally I matured, became in business, and after that we were close for the rest of his life. I mean, he was like one of my best 5 friends for the rest of my life.
And so it sounds like he passed at some point.
Yes.
Was he involved with you all the way through your journey up until his passing?
Everything. He and I built the tax software company, HuTax, and then we merged that with Jackson Hewitt, and he was a director of Jackson Hewitt. Then we sold Jackson Hewitt and started Liberty, and he was a director of Liberty. So he was with me every step of the way.
You know, people say it all the time, right? Don't mix family and business, but apparently they're wrong in a lot of ways, right?
Well, I've experienced both. Not only did I work with my dad, I worked with my mom and my sisters and all of my children. I have 6 children, and one's a senior in high school, but the other 5 have all worked for me. My college grad just is still working for me, and the other 4 all work.
We had a little power failure there, and we lost our audio through portion of this. So we're going to pick back up.
I'll take you through the quick version of my career. I was 33 years old when we acquired Mel Jackson. We built it up to a public company and sold it for 15 years later for $483 million. And I had a 3-year non-compete, but the non-compete didn't cover Canada because Jackson Hewitt didn't have any offices in Canada. And having grown up in Buffalo, I knew the Canadian tax system. So we opened Liberty Tax Service in Canada, and within 3 years became a top 100 retail chain. So now I built one of the top 100 in US and one of the top 100 in Canada, and came back to the United States in 2000 when my non-compete ended. Now I had to compete against my own name and my own software and my own system at Jackson Hewitt. However, not only did we grow faster than Jackson Hewitt, we grew faster than them H&R Block combined.
What would you attribute that growth to?
A smart answer would be John Hewitt, but if you get to start over again, you built a company that for 15 years that became $1 billion company with 6,000 locations, and you get a chance to do it all over again. If you don't do it better the second time, you're an idiot. So I would attribute it to the fact that I had learned so much. Plus, I brought so many people over. When I left Jackson Hewitt, I brought my top 4 people with me. So when I started Jackson Hewitt back in 1982, the only person I brought with me was my ex-wife. But now I had a team.
Which you mentioned earlier, and we lost the audio to this, but you had to fire her at one point?
Yeah, at one point in the development of Jackson Hewitt, I had to fire my ex-wife. But I brought great people over with a better system, and I took all the mistakes I had learned, and then coupled with all of that, we developed much faster. So in the 12 years at Jackson Hewitt, when we got to 4,000 offices, top 10 fastest growing ever, we did that with Liberty. At Jackson Hewitt, we only had 900 after 12 years. When you think of all the advantages I had learned from all my mistakes. My name was famous because now Jackson Hewitt is renowned with 6,000 locations and famous throughout at least the tax preparation industry. Plus, I had so many.
Well, and franchising too. I mean, weren't you like franchisor of the year?
I won franchisor of the year. There was when I won in 2005. There'd only been 15 ever. So I'm one of the icons of the industry. I've got great people. I've got great experience. So it all combined to grow a lot.
As far as founders go, you have how many total franchises? I want to say 10,000-ish franchisees under
my offices that of the 2 companies I built grew to 10,000 offices. Jackson Hewitt grew to 6,000. Liberty grew to 4,000. So I'm the only person that's developed 2 of the top 100 retail franchise chains in the country.
Yeah, and I'd be interested to even know any other franchises, and this even includes things like how many Ray Kroc, for example, have, when he hung up at McDonald's.
He certainly didn't have 10,000. I'm not sure. I don't know the answer to that. We can Google it offline and find that out.
Yeah, we should. I'll try to throw it on the screen when we do the edit here, but I'd be curious to know because I mean that's an insane amount of franchises.
I brought in addition to that, I brought in 5,200 franchisees. Now there must have been someone else that's done that. I don't know them, but I brought in. I mean, I've changed, and they had hundreds of thousands of employees. So I've changed the lives of just so many people. It's been again blessed and rewarding.
That has to be an incredible feeling too. You and I have talked on and off camera now, and I know your passion is, helping other people and helping other people grow, and being able to contribute to that many lives has to be an incredible feeling.
Every day I go to sleep happy and I wake up happy, and I'm aggravated all the way in between, but I've had an incredible, blessed life, and I've accomplished many, many things, but the number one thing I've accomplished is improving so many lives.
What would be the number one tip that you would give somebody going into the franchise space to help them build a franchise brand?
Yeah, most franchisors go out of business, and they do not understand. They think of, and most people don't understand the difference between running a franchise company versus running a non-franchise company. These aren't employees. These are a herd of, the way I think of it is, and I have 6 children, the way I think of it is I've brought in 5,200 children, right? And so you have to think of them as children. You have to think they have their customers. You never use the word partners because you can get in all kinds of trouble with
the legalities.
Yeah. But they have a responsibility also. So you have to exercise tough love, but you have to love them. You have to love them. And my philosophy with children is, and I've had 6 of them, as I said, but they're aggravating 90% of the time. But the other 10%, they make up for the time they're aggravating. Franchises are aggravating 90% of the time, but the other 10% more than make up for the times that they're not aggravating. So you have to treat them as very special. You have to do what's best for them. You have to listen to them. You have to understand them. And you have to have a system. And it all comes down to these few words: happy, successful franchisees. If you're a franchisor, that's what you have to create, a system of happy, successful franchisees, knowing that they're not all going to be happy and successful. I've made 1,000 millionaires through my franchise system. I've also had 1,000 people go out of business. And so you have to understand that what I learned quickly is the key that you're looking for in a franchisee. It doesn't matter how smart you are. It doesn't matter how experienced you are. It doesn't matter how educated you are. In fact, the smarter you are and the more educated, the more you think you know better than me. What the key element of success is, you got to follow the yellow brick road. You got to follow the recipe. And and I brought in 5,200 franchisees. Not one person has ever followed the recipe. The best, the superstars, follow 98, 99%. The worst, they follow less than 90%. And if you don't follow the recipe, that's what you're getting when you get a franchise
Why
system.
buy it, right?
Right. Why would you pay me I say to people, especially people that have already paid me, why are you paying money not to listen to me? You cannot listen to me for free. Leave me alone.
Do you have any tips on how to deal with that frustration as a franchisor, right? When you know that they're capable, they have all the right, ingredients to make the stew, but then they don't listen to what temperature to set the stove and so on and so forth.
Do you have children?
I do not.
Okay. So it's the same as your frustration with children, right? You need to do this and do that. And it's the same frustration. You're going to have frustration. I don't owe it to a franchisee for them to succeed. What I owe them is them to know what it takes to succeed. And so I give them the recipe. And when they deviate off the yellow brick road, when they get off the path, I owe it to them to tell them. So if you're a franchisee and you're not succeeding, I owe it to you to explain to you what you need to do to change. I can't, even though I implore you, I beg you, I shout at you. I mean, I yell at you. I give you written notices. I can't change you. It's all up to you. The 10 most important 2-letter words. If it is to be, it is up to me. And with each franchise, if it is to be, it is up to you. I give you the system. That's my job. I've been doing that this is my 55th year. I've been doing it for 55 years. You've been doing it. Some of you haven't been doing it for 55 minutes. Half of you haven't been doing it for 55 months. You need to follow the system. And but I don't owe them more than that. If they don't listen, at the end of the day, if I say that on February 7th, you need to be open at 7 a.m. and you decide to be open at 10 a.m., you've decided to fail. You have made a decision to fail. And when you join, the phrase that I've used far more than any phrase in my whole life, 100 times more maybe, is follow the system.
Hey, I could see that. So I'm just learning. I don't even have franchisees yet. We just started, selling, and I'm trying to anticipate how I'm going to handle those situations. Do you have any tips on getting them on track? Like, I know obviously it's up to them to listen and to follow it.
Sure. But there's lots of tips on what to do. The one thing you need to understand is that once they become a franchise, it's us and them, no matter what. It's us.
I hate that idea.
Yeah, it's us and them. And
it should be a cohesive.
Exactly. I've been in meetings and it's funny. I will sit in a meeting and I'll be there, and there'll be some first-year franchisees with 6-month experience right next to me. And there'll be some brand new people, and they'll ask a question of the guy with 6 months experience. And it's beyond my belief that they're not asking me with over 50 years of experience. It's sort of like us in them. It's when you have children and there's a group of 15-year-olds, they're all against the parent, right? It's parents and children. It's just, so what you do is you take your superstars, the people that listen 99 or 98%, and the system isn't just one component, right? We have something that I've developed that almost no one ever has. It's called the top 10.
Mm-hmm.
These are the top 10 most critical things that you need to do. I ended up with 10 because of the Bible and the 10 commandments, right? That's how I got to 10, but it might've been top 8 and actually Liberty went to 13. And even though we always called it the top 10, but I figured in the Big Ten football, they had like 13 or 14 teams. You can have a top 10 that has 13 things. But we found experts at all of them. This person was good at getting referrals. So we used that franchise spokesperson as we rewarded them and invited them to speak at our meetings in front of the other franchisees. So you have your franchisees lead by example. You pick the superstars and partner with them. They feel good about it.
Sure.
They like the acclaim. Right? We say Adam's he's the best guy in the country at referrals. He does a great job. Adam, how do you do it? And what are the secrets to it? What do you tell? And so you utilize their compatriots, that they believe more than they believe me. Just because I'm corporate, I lose credibility. It's automatic.
I love that. So you're able to get the information across. I love it. That makes a lot of sense. It really does.
So we had like the Elite 18. We had Top Gun. We had the National Advisory Council.
Mm-hmm.
We had all kinds of great people that we treated well, gave them extra. We would fly them in for special meetings. They would, and we would hold them on a pedestal, mm-hmm. and they set the example for others. And we had experts in every one of the top 10.
The parent-child explanation makes a ton of sense when it comes to this.
Right? Even if you don't have children, you've been a child.
Yeah.
And there are times, and every person has to admit, I should have listened. And there were times that I didn't listen that I should have listened.
When do you just let them fail too? Like, when you finally pull the plug?
The numbers do the trick, right? And what we did in our franchise agreement was they had to hit a certain minimum after 5 years. And the minimum was based on, they're all competing with H&R Block. So we used the H&R Block in their area as a determiner. But we said, if you're not doing X number of revenue in 5 years, then we have the right to take it back. So we didn't have to wait 5 years. After the first season, you say, you're not going to meet that number. You should sell. Then after the second, almost everyone begs for more time. They say, I'm going to listen. I promise you, I'm going to listen. Now they don't, but they tell, and they'll go on for months and years saying, I'm going to listen. John, I'm going to start listening. So about the third year, you say, there's 2 more years to go. You say, you're not going to meet your number. You have an asset worth 100, 200, whatever the number is, $100,000. You need to sell, because at the end of 5 years, that committee is going, they have the right to take it.
They're going to take it.
You're going to get nothing. You're going to get nothing. So we use that as a sword over their heads that eventually they sell. And so we never had to take one back, because they always sell. They always sell before they get to that 5-year period.
A lot of the listeners that are going to watch the show are not novice in franchising. So
they're not novice. They're experienced.
I'm sorry, they're inexperienced with franchising, meaning that they don't have a lot of knowledge on even the franchise system as a whole, right? I get this all the time. You have people that want to go into business, and I push people into franchising, especially people that have never been in business before, right? I instantly buy a franchise. Don't try to learn this stuff out on your own. You're gonna waste a bunch of time and a bunch of money, and it's gonna be a lot less expensive, and you're gonna be way more successful if you buy a good franchise, right? What advice would you give to somebody, or do you give to people that are looking at franchising for the first time, buying a franchise as a franchisee?
The key is are there happy, successful franchises? And you got to be careful because in some systems I've seen there's happy franchisees because they're not yet unsuccessful. Because for a year or two or three, you could just love what you do and be a poor businessman and be bleeding money.
Hmm.
So you got to be careful that when you talk to a potential franchisee or to an existing franchisee, that they're actually making money. Because I've seen people, even in my own system, who are just failures. They wanted to stay in. They just love what they did, even though they're not making any money. I say, go find somewhere else to be extraordinary. So you need to have a validation. The validation can't simply be, I'm a happy franchise. Tell me about how much money you're making. Tell me about your cash flow. And so you got to get under the covers and make sure that there are existing franchisees with positive cash flow. Now you can tell that by some people don't want to release their financials, right? So you can tell that by, are they referring their friends or their relatives to become a franchise? If you're a franchise, then you got to be careful with anyone under 50 franchises, right? If you don't have 50 franchises, you're in trouble. You need about 100 offices or locations.
John, I don't like your advice because I'm new. You're scaring them all. No, I'm kidding.
That's okay. So you got to be careful with someone, extra careful. If they have more, then you can be less careful. But there's no excuse at all, if I've been doing this for 5 or 7 years, that one of my employees or one of my friends or one of my relatives hasn't already bought a franchise. And because if it's a great system, the employees are going to buy franchise. And in my companies, my own employees buy franchise. So at Loyalty Brands, we have 30 employees and 8 of them own franchises of one brand or another.
Now they continue to work with you with the franchise?
Yeah.
Okay.
So they still work for me and they own franchise.
That's awesome. So what's the initial investment for, let's stick with the tax side. So for a tax office, what are they looking at initial investment range?
Yeah, in all the brands. And this has been true for the last 25, 30 years. The startup fee in a tax business is about $70,000.
Okay. So it's a low cost franchise then.
Yeah. It's, and that's one of the great things I love about it. So I find it far less satisfactory to bring in a millionaire. Let's say someone's worth $4 million and I make them an extra $1 million. That's less satisfactory than someone's worth $75,000 and I make them $1 million. So I find that the rewarding is changing lives. It doesn't change a millionaire who has $4 million to go to $5 million very much, but someone that goes from 75,000 net worth to $1 million, that's life changing. That's generation changing.
Yeah. So I asked for selfish reasons because my initial investment range is anywhere from, roughly 150 all the way up to 400,000. And do you have any brands that are near that range?
Well, it depends on, yes, it depends on the equipment. So for example, in our Zoom and Grumman, there's 2 investments. One is the total startup, which is about 60, and then $90,000 van. However,
they only do one van.
Yeah, everyone starts with one,
okay.
And they'll in about average of about 6 months they'll go to a second one, and then another 8 months to go to a third one, and so forth. But if you can lease the van, and we set up a deal with an outside vendor, an outside leasing company for them, and they can lease the van, and so the startup is about 65,000. So, in our companies that have higher startup like that, we have a roofing company that requires extra, but we try to arrange leasing or financing for the equipment that it adds to the cost, right? So, all of them we can get into for under 100,000.
Okay. The reason I was asking is I'm trying to figure out a way to make it, because I agree with you where, I don't want to make millionaires an extra million. I want to create millionaires. That's one of my missions, is to help people. But in my space, the initial investment's generally a little bit higher in the range because of the nature of my industry, right?
Is it because of equipment?
Partially. It's operating capital to float accounts receivable. So I do B2B, and there's a 30-day net period. So it's floating the accounts receivable there that requires them to have a little more capital on hand.
I know lots of companies that provide accounts receivable funding.
Yeah, so factoring and such. Yeah.
Such that. So to me, that hurts your profit.
Right.
But cash flow is king, right? To me, cash flow is everything.
Agreed.
So if I can figure a way to get the investment that's 200 down into 80 or 90, then I'm going to appeal to 3 times as many people.
Yeah, it's kind of where my head's been too. I think we're gonna probably explore that and try to figure out a way to bring that down for them. Because I have people that are interested all the time, and it's just that they're not financially qualified. So I have to solve that. That's my responsibility as a franchisor, right?
Yeah, we solved that. It only if you want to grow. It's only a responsibility if you want to grow.
True.
We solved that at Liberty Tax, where we had a $225 million line of credit. And as you can imagine, the tax industry, your revenue from May 1st until December 31st is very little, right? 95% of our revenue comes during the tax season. So our franchisees had expenses of rent and utilities and so forth year round. Plus, if you're going out and renting more offices.
Mm-hmm.
So out of the $225,000, more than half the money we lent was to existing franchisees who were able to pay us back in the tax season. So each year we would borrow money. Most of the money was spent December, January, getting ready for this tax season, and we'd pay it all back by March. But we lend money ourselves to franchisees because seasonal businesses are difficult to get banks to understand. And so they couldn't go out themselves and get good financing. So we did it for them. So that's another way to do it too, is figure out a way to finance it yourself. And almost, you can almost think of it. We had a finance arm. So it was a finance company, if you will, under the umbrella of Liberty Tax.
Did you guys ever, throughout your years, finance initial investment and everything for them?
Directly? Yeah, lots of times. I would say out of the 5,200 franchises I brought into my career, at least half of them, we financed the franchise fee.
Really?
Yeah. At least half of them we financed.
You didn't have any, well, obviously not. You said you had never had to take any back. They always sold. So.
Well, we had to take some back for different reasons.
Okay.
Right. Not because they didn't meet the 5 years. Right.
Was there any correlation with them not being vested? The only reason I'm skeptical on doing something like that, right, is because I would like the individual to be vested and actually have something on the line. I feel that's a motivator for them to help push them to be successful.
Now, you have to be careful when you think you know better than me.
I'm not.
I know that. I know
a question.
Because that's the way most people think, right? Yeah. There's a phrase that I disagree with totally. The definition of this phrase I disagree with I've learned in my 5,200 franchisees that there's a correct definition of this phrase that the general public doesn't understand. And the phrase is skin in the game.
Mm-hmm.
Now, do you agree that if I say the phrase skin in the game, people think, yeah.
Just vested in some way. So,
how else could they be vested?
Emotionally.
Exactly. So it's really emotion, not cash. It's really, you were saying, I'm afraid to lend them money because they have to have money
Well, I'm not afraid to lend them money.
Let's pretend I lend them every cent. Why would you be afraid of that? Because you're looking at the wrong thing. You're looking at, now cash can be, in many ways, can be a sign of whether they should be a franchisee. I'm not arguing that.
Sure.
Right? If you get to be 40 years old and you don't have any money your friends don't have any money, your family doesn't have any money to invest in you, then why am I investing in you?
Yeah.
I mean, so there's a real reason for that. But skin in the game, you're right. It is, when you said the word emotion, it comes to, I'm all in or not all in. I'm an owner or an employee. And you have to have skin in the game. Means ownership, mental ownership. I'm Snap. You have me. You own me. I'm in the system. I'm Zoom and Grimmett. I love Zoom and Grimmett. This is my future. I'm all in. I think about it every waking minute. I work on it every waking minute, right? It's my life. Whether I put money in, I mean, I've had millionaires put 100,000 in and walk away within a year. Oh, I don't like that. I mean, and then I've had people put in zero and they change their lives and they work, 70, 80 hours a week to make it work. So with skin in the game means mental emotion, not cash.
Any tips on measuring that? Like measuring if they're legitimately bought in. So if they have that skin in the game emotionally.
Yeah, you have to be careful because again, if you can't put any money in, 10,000, 20,000, 50,000, and you can't get that money somehow, then red flags, ding, 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 something's wrong. So you have to have an explanation. And if I'm not pretty well sold from the explanation, I mean, someone can get a nasty divorce, right? And they can have a disaster, right? Their house burned down, there are things that happen, right? There are things that happen. But if I can't get an explanation, I make them work for me for X number of months. So let's say, Adam, this happened to me. Well, I'm skeptical. Well, I'll tell you what, you go work for my franchisee, a company store, for 3 months or 6 months, or typically in the tax industry, it was always you work for the tax. If you work for a franchisee or company store and you prove yourself, by May, I will finance you for a franchise. And not only will I finance the franchise fee, I will lend you some operating capital. So you get to prove yourself. So then when you have an employee, 98% of employees or 97% act like employees. Mm-hmm. Some of them only a handful act like 2 or 3% act like owner. So if you prove yourself and you act like an owner, I will help you. And it's a very, and with our costs, if it's $70,000 investment and $40,000 is non-cash, it's a franchise fee. That's very low risk. And if you do the math in my business, if you lend $30,000 to 10 people, and guess how many have to succeed in order and just succeed for 5 years plus to pay you back that $30,000? Exactly. If 1 out of 10 make it, then you made it. In the meantime, you're gaining momentum. I mean, it's success builds on success. If I get a new franchise here, then other people are more attracted. And people that were thinking about buying that area, oops, I better jump at it because they might sell my area, yeah. Right? Or I better grab that area. That's the second choice. So there's all kinds of benefit and momentum of making that. So if you can afford to do it, if you can build that system. And, when I started Liberty, it was tough to get a $500,000 line of credit, even though I was immensely successful with Jackson Hewitt. So we started at 500,000 and then went to 1 million, 5 million, 10 million, 50 million. And we ended up, I was amazed that after 12 years, the banks were standing in line to lend me money at 2.5%, $225 million.
That sounds like an awesome problem to have. Can we touch base about private equity? So we're talking about funding and we're talking about money coming in. And you have now taken 2 companies public, correct? And both of those had venture capital investors in them. Do you have any tips for anybody out there that's considering, bringing private equity into their business? Anything to steer clear for, what to look for in these investors?
Yeah, my advice is don't. don't. But sometimes you have to, right? And so so you have to do a lot of things you don't like in building a business, like firing people. And, when you start a business and it has revenue of 0, you can afford X number of employees. When it has revenue of 500 million, you need to change out employees along the way, because most employees that can do a job with a small company with 0 income can't do it when you have hundreds of millions of them. So you have to make tough choices along. But it's venture capitalists are what I learned. The biggest lesson is that when you start from scratch and they invest the money, you're both thinking long term. And then they typically, no matter what they tell you, we're lifetime investors. We're going to be with you for 10 years, blah, blah, blah. About 5 years, they're looking for an exit. So in the back of their minds, they're thinking, and they get paid, and their bonuses and pay is based on typically 5 years. So almost all of them that I've ever met have a 5-year window. So when you're in your first year, yeah, everything's great. You're holding arms. You're just buddy. But as you get towards the 3rd, 4th, 5th year, now they want to maximize profits for that 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th
So
year.
they're trying to come into the business and control things more.
They're much more adamant about their exit. And in order for the exit to be the most profitable, you have to have the best EBITDA, best cash flow. And so they're saying, you shouldn't spend, that's going to help 5 years from now. They're deaf ears, right? If you're in your 5th year and they've invested and you're talking about something, you're thinking, okay, in 5 years, if I invest $1 million in 5 years, we're going to have a $50 million company or a $50 million product or whatever it is. They don't care. They say, no, but what are you doing for me today? Right? So I'm not a fan of I would avoid private equity in the future at all costs.
Do you look at your own, because you've made a buttload of money. Do you look at your investments the same way that a venture capitalist would look at it? I think this is a difference between founders and actual business owners versus an investor. There's a huge difference in the way they look at money.
Yeah, exactly. Venture capitalists, private equity, money is money. To me, I have 6 children, and my 7th child is my business. Now, I always put my children ahead of my business, although they don't always see that, right? That I'm so fanatically focused on winning and competing, and I spend my time on my business. So my own children will say, you put the business ahead of me. But, when I lost my first business, Jackson Hewitt, and I left, and people say after 15 years, and, we sold it for $483 million, but people said, that's your baby. I mean, how do you feel? I mean, how come you're not upset? How come you're not upset that you lost your company?
Right.
And I said, if God came to me and said, I'm going to take your child or take your company, guess what I'd pick? Take the company.
Right.
If God said, okay, I'm going to cripple one of your children or take the company, take the company. So you have to put in perspective. And I can be fanatical, and it reminds me of Dennis Rodman, Dennis Rodman, famous basketball player, miserable. He hated everyone, fought with his own teammates. I have no respect for his career, except for he was on the Chicago Bulls when they won with Michael Jordan.
Yeah, I remember. I'm from Chicago originally.
Oh, yeah? Okay. So you get that. Okay, so that was about your age range, right? In the 90s. So they asked Dennis Rodman, I was changing channels and I saw him ask him a question. And again, I have no respect for him and the way he treated other human beings. But they said, this I respect. They said, how did you get along with Michael Jordan? And he said, well, he and I are exactly the same in one way. When you cross over the line and get on the court, we would rather die than lose. We will give 200%. We would rather die than lose, right? Winning is everything. Winning is everything. And he said, and so that's how it is in business with me. Competition is everything. So I'm fanatically, when I come to work or when I think about work, I gotta win. I mean, I'm just, the name of my book is I Compete because competition drives me. So, that's really a key part of my personality that drives me every day. Every day is competition.
So when you look at investments, that's what you're looking at, right? You're just, it doesn't matter as long as I win. The return can be 20 years down the line, or it could be a week down the line.
Right. I don't care about winning
today
a battle. I care about winning the war. I lose battles.
Right.
I always win the war. So far, I've been
Sun Tzu, Art of War, right?
Right. What? I don't know.
Oh, dude, good book. It's like takes 10 minutes to read. Right. It's like a tiny book, but it was a Japanese general or something.
Okay. How do you spell the name of the author?
Sun Tzu.
Well, you can tell me afterward.
Yeah. I'll put it on the screen too for the readers, but yeah, that's a must. It's a strategic military book. It's very short read, but he talks about strategy and winning in war. And then let's talk about what you're doing today. So loyalty brands is interesting, and I'd love to touch base about how you're getting into other things. We have Zoom and Grooming, ATAX, the Inspection Boys, Little Medical School, which I haven't heard of that one, so I'm curious about that one. American Exteriors, Ledgers, and a staffing agency. So you're kind of expanding beyond tax and going into a little bit of everything, it looks like. What made you want to do a platform brand like this?
I sort of stumbled into it.
Okay.
With my non-compete at Liberty Tax, I had 18 months where I didn't have anything to do. And I ran into my corporate attorney who had been with me at both Jackson Hewitt and at Liberty. And he said, why don't you, he's now on his own and he's a franchise attorney. He's great. If you need a franchise attorney, he's spectacular. And he said, I have this company where they have a great franchise system, but they've been in business 13 years and they have 13 franchises. They can't sell any franchise. Why don't you consider partnering with them and then doing that instead of taxes? Why don't you get out of tax?
Which brand was this?
It's the business broker.
Okay.
So I tried it and I thought, wow, I can bring a number of things to the table with franchisors. I can bring mentoring. I'm incredibly successful and I have, the reason we call it loyalty is I have so many people that have been with me so long. I mean, I have 3 people who've been with me 35 years, 5 people have been with me 50 or 30 years. I mean, I just have tons of expertise so we can mentor, we can help develop and sell. I've sold 5,200 franchisees and I have contacts all over the country. Having brought in 5,200 franchisees, you can't name a city in this country of more than 50,000 people that don't know John Hewitt, that don't have a Jackson Hewitt or a Liberty in there. So I can make calls and you can get customers, you can get employees, you can get possible franchisees anywhere in the United States and Canada. I bring a lot to the table. And then we can cross market. For example, our biggest tax office does 7,000 return and 4,000 of them have dogs. And most of those dogs need grooming. Our biggest grooming has 5,000 customers. 5,000 of them need a tax return. So we can do cross marketing. So we've been experimenting with that concept. Right now, we've decided that our biggest focus is our most successful 2 brands are pets and tax.
Pets are really big right now.
Pets are, the thing I love about pets is, I mean, so many things about it, but there's no H&R Block, there's no McDonald's, there's no Subways, there's no number one, there's no brand name. And, and it grows so fast. The industry is growing so fast. In tax, it grows about 1% a year, the whole industry. In pets, it's supposed to double over the next 5 or 6 years. So pets is just growing incredibly. And they did a survey of Americans with children, and they asked them, do you like your pet better or your children? And 2/3 of them said, I like my pet better than my child. So pets are just going crazy.
I see that. Yeah. By the way, I use something similar. I don't think I have a Zoom and Grooming by me, but I use a mobile pet for my dog. So
yeah, we're not in Cleveland yet. We're in Cincinnati, Dayton, Columbus, but we're not in Cleveland yet.
So how's it work for the franchisors? Are they partnering with you or are you acquiring the companies?
We have different deals with each. Some we own, the majority. Some were 50-50, and a couple were minority shareholder.
Okay. And how long has loyalty been around now?
We started, we're in our 5th year.
Okay. It's very new. A lot of brands for 5 years.
Right. Yep.
You do everything quick, right?
I'm at my age, I better.
So what's the future hold for you, John? How big do you want to get loyalty? What's the vision there with loyalty?
Yeah, I would say that I'm 74 years old. By the time I'm 80, I want to focus on one industry, one brand, one. I'll be happy as long as I'm competing. They got to kill me to stop me. I mean, when I was a kid, I was just as cocky as I am today. And I knew I was going to get rich. I didn't know how. I didn't have any concept of how I was going to get rich, but I knew I was going to get rich. I just knew it. I said, well, I'll make a few $1 million and retire. But along the way, I realized, what would I do? I don't like fishing or golfing, or I don't like sitting around. I mean, I'm go, 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 go. And I learned that the journey is the joy. You know, the 15-year journey at Jackson Hewitt was the joy. The treasure at the end of the rainbow, that's anticlimactic. And that, I mean, it's anticlimactic. So I'm always going to be busy. I think that by the time I'm 80, I'll be down to 1 or 2 brands, and I'll have sold the others off, got them started. And like I sold Jackson Hewitt, and I sold Liberty. God bless them. You know, I'm not a materialistic person. I'm on to the next venture, but I think I'll focus on most likely one brand in 6 years.
I love it. I love it. I can resonate with that because I don't do what I do either for money. I'm nowhere even close to your ballpark yet. But
not yet, but you're young. Yeah. You have years to catch up.
Young-ish, we'll say.
I started Liberty when I was 49 years old. And in 12 years, it became a $500 million company.
Yeah, we have big plans for the future. We got to get there, and I'm trying to break those statistics that we talked about. Right, I want to make sure that I'm one of the franchisors out there that doesn't fall onto the wrong side of the statistics. Well,
now you have me to consult with.
There you go.
You can just keep me in touch, and a guy on my board of directors, Bob Gepp, he's helped over 1,600 franchisors, and we love to help people and mentor. So we don't spend a lot of time, but if you keep us surprised of what's going on, we can give you tidbits now and then.
I would love that. I really appreciate that. It's very kind. I want to mention a few things about John. I know this episode's probably going to seem very short, but it was much longer, and I don't want to take too much more of John's time. I know he's very, very busy. So for the audience out there, if I didn't mention it, we lost a little bit of our audio due to a power failure. So this will end up being a shorter one, but I think we got some excellent advice for franchisors and franchisees and business people in general from John today. John has a book, which I will show to the camera here. I Compete. I have not read yet. It's in my reading list though, and I will read it. It sounds like an excellent one. And John likes to talk about his failures over success because that's what you can truly learn from, right?
That's human nature. We learn from our mistakes. But only smart people learn from their mistake.
Yeah. Well, the definition of insanity, right, is doing the same thing over and over again.
That's what Einstein said.
Yeah. So it's been a pleasure, John. Thank you so much for doing the show. Is there anything you'd like to talk to the audience about, or would you like to let them know where they can learn about loyalty brands?
I love our mission statement, having fun, improving lives. And I think if on Monday morning you're not looking forward to where you're going to the wrong place. So I think I invented, probably not, but thank God it's Monday, TGIM, not thank God it's Friday. Most people live, thank God it's Friday. I live, thank God it's Monday. And improving lives, you got to give back. You got to, so I just love our mission statement. You can steal it for any of your brands or anyone can use it. But if you're blessed, you're expected to give back. And that's been my mantra for my entire career.
Thank you so much, John. I appreciate it.
Pleasure.
All right.
Thank you.
I'm Refreshman, and I'm here to empower you to take charge of your destiny. Are you tired of working for someone else? Do you dream of making a difference in your community and unleashing your full potential? Then look no further than Refresh Franchising. With us by your side, you can start your own heroic business venture with the unwavering support and cutting-edge resources you need to conquer your goals. Our franchise model is like a super serum that will give you the strength to succeed. Refresh provides extensive training, ongoing mentorship, and an established brand with a loyal customer base. Plus, you'll become part of a heroic league of entrepreneurs who serve as allies on your journey towards greatness. And the best part, you won't have to waste time building your business from scratch like some kind of neophyte. With Refresh Franchising, you'll hit the ground running at lightning speed and unlock the key to heroic financial success. So gather your courage, summon your inner superhero, and visit refreshfranchising.com to launch your heroic franchise journey. Always remember, together, we can achieve greatness.